It's a company that's been around for over 10 years. Background check software. So, you know, it's kind of interesting to hear all the Proposition 1 stuff.
In order to do that, I'm contemplating buying an iPad. So that I
Yeah,
can have something to do.
yeah, that's interesting. I was like, background checks, I know that. So, very cool.
Nice. So how does all that work? Are you connecting with a bunch of other systems?
Yeah, well, basically, it's before this, I worked for a company called CSID. They're here in town, near Zilker, and they do identity theft. The software itself, the way both of them work is similar. They have different data vendors, and they just pull them all together and present a report. And, you know, there's a lot of software that does that kind of stuff. So for background checks, there's a bunch of different background data, you know, criminal or employment background. Yeah, aliases, you know, in different counties and things. So it just, you hit all these vendors, data vendors, and pull in the data and present a report. So yeah, I mean, that's basically really what it is. Like a lot of software does. Just a different space. Yeah. I'm Mickey. Good to meet you. Okay. So where do y'all work? Oh, 2 places. Okay. 17 inches, 18 inches.
The width?
Yeah, we'll see. It's pretty gnarly stuff as well. It's fun.
So do y'all actually use it?
I'm trying to be a scout.
Scout?
Or two, but no, we don't use it as user play. I'd like to get it plugged into Scout, but it's not happening. Just got community engineers who are all hyped up about React. All the new
All the JavaScript stuff.
Yeah, but I've got a couple of side projects.
So is most of the backend stuff that Scout in JavaScript? Y'all just do
Yeah, most of the, we have Postgres for the backend, and then we got a lot of really old Angular.js for the front, but
Height 23.
for filming on YouTube React.js, like we're doing Angular
13.
in React.
I think the approach of, I don't even act like a manager. Okay, well, this is an array.
So what do you do 2 jobs?
Well, I used to work for Chico, and Scout, but
They couldn't let you go.
yeah, so I still know where all of the dragons are hidden, so
Kind of contract sometimes. Yeah.
mostly because I put them in.
Job security, you know. You can't even leave.
About like 5 times a day, Alex comes across a comment that's like, note to self from Nathaniel, this will be worth it, some good beer money someday.
I came across this gross a few times recently.
Well, if
I know this is a gross hack, but
Really that
Usually it's because I don't have time to refactor somebody else's code that came out before. Or at least I'd like to think that.
Maybe. One is a lot. For one, it's more of a notch to that color swatch. The other one is like, that's like.
How's your job?
The other one is more blue.
There's pizza.
You have to make sure you're telling them the right one.
No, I remember the one on the left.
There's a darker one. You like the darker one. So that's probably, I'm choosing.
Are you thinking just that wedge shape or wrap around the
No.
It's got a scale. That's the most important thing.
I worked on Return Path. Their logo's right there. They used to be based out of here, but they ended up like buying an office on like 6th and Congress. Yeah, I mean it's like I don't know if you're familiar with Other Inbox. They acquired Other Inbox.
Yeah.
So yeah, so they like Return Path itself just makes like apps for like enterprise level email apps, like email fraud protection for companies are like super exciting. I worked though on an API that they acquired called Context.io, which is really yay. I enjoy that API a lot. There really isn't a lot out there like it. I mean you can use the Google API, you can use the Outlook API, but like we at least also integrate with like generic IMAP stuff.
I keep meaning to sit down with somebody and build out a robot that uses the Context.io API and learns which emails I automatically archive. Because on Boxer, I can just swipe over and archive like right from the screen. So I archive them without reading them is basically the rule. And after I've done this, it installs a filter that automatically archives them and pushes them into a Slack channel that I can just catch up with whatever whenever I want. Because anything that's automatically archiving, I probably don't want a notification for. I just want like a stream of like, oh yeah, this is kind of what happened over the last week. But I haven't sat down and done it yet.
You work with Bonnie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hang out with Bonnie and Claire.
Yep. I sit next to Bonnie. And Claire is essentially in a different team. But she's awesome. Like her.
We keep meaning to go on the social ride on Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of forgot to follow up on that. You should come if you'd like.
Yeah, it looks a lot of fun.
Daniel, you ever did a social ride? Really cool.
How hard is it to keep up though?
Not hard. I mean, everybody goes their own way. And like people stick behind and wait for people on. You go where everyone goes. But it's cool. It's like a moving party. So like some people wear like costumes. Some people have like crazy boom boxes in their bike. It's just like mayhem. It's kind of dangerous, but you just gotta keep looking around you. Yeah, Claire was wrong. Like the operator bicycle while talking to you. I'm like, you should come on a social ride.
Very awesome.
You want to test out your slice real quick?
On the dot. Right, it's like 5 minutes in the elevator. Probably.
There.
That's it.
You know, I tested them up real quick.
That's what we do. It's about 5 hours.
Yes. You can just connect via air. Like,
Hey, Justin. Nice to meet you.
still at,
So at
where are
Rails.
you at again?
I was
Oh,
really
that's
upset
not
that
where
my
you
slides
were
didn't
last
work.
time.
Because you know how like slides.com is essentially like like a reveal, like a user-friendly reveal JS.
Yeah,
And at first I thought like,
still working.
what the hell? Like, I've used Reveal.js all the time. I can't believe that a company like ResConf can't handle a Reveal.js presentation. Turns out it wasn't that, it was
Initially hard
architecture.
on
And it happened to other people that weren't just on Reveal.
I wasn't sure if the speaker page would actually remember where you were.
I work for this company that's credit card processing. So most of our clients are. Wow. Branch out, I can send you companies are profitable. Chains on the doors or anything like that. So, ticket button.
It's probably gonna go away. Oh, well, no, yeah.
That's fine. I'm good. How are you?
I was in the facing
So I thought.
Yeah, I forget. I usually forget about this one.
Yeah, yeah. I've seen it last night and I work on it. Yeah. Also, it's on my radar.
Yeah.
I mean, I followed the
So it depends on how much I want to buy.
So it's basically like a software project.
Yeah, exactly. This is not a fun class. So it depends. I can just, but I think I can see
Yeah,
go through a bunch of stuff. So that's like the parts I can do all.
I'm gonna be doing more of it. Like my girlfriend.
So I do want to leave time for questions. I kind of have set up that people will want to rebuttal. I'd rather them say it than just Twitter.
That's fair. Oh no, I'm okay. So were you in like 4 kitchens or something? Or is it?
Yeah, I was. I work at Return Path now. I worked at 4 kitchens for like 3 years.
Is that still a thing?
Oh yeah, that's good. We were open a lot last year.
Flip went to go work there, right?
Oh yeah.
Is he still there?
Yeah. How do you know Flip?
I used to work with Flip.
Oh really?
Yeah, I swear.
Nice.
He used to do like Empire.
Cool.
Right after class kind of dissolved.
Yeah. He has the best gig, in my opinion, at 4 kitchens because all he does is NBC all the time. Yeah. Like the NBC, like the channel.
Oh, he's Nick now?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought that was like next
It's like, it's context switching.
I was like, that's pretty much all I do. I thought it was so rare.
Yeah, I was like, I don't think she's saying NPC.
Yeah, no.
That's not like something
I
that's
should have said NBC.com.
Oh, okay.
That was probably a bit better.
Is that Microsoft version of AC.net?
Yes.
Probably start with the .com.
How come they never did like ASP.NET? Like ASP.DOT.NET.
Like crack.com.com.
I'm really sad that that website is not up anymore.
I found, I think it was apple.com, but with 3 P's instead of.
That's brilliant.
I'm still shocked that Dribble does not own Dribble with 2 P's. Because I still do that all the time. Then you go to some brand
Yeah,
website.
really.
Yeah.
Like basketball?
No, there is no water.
Yes, there. I think there's a water thingy outside.
Somewhere out there?
Yeah, there's like a water thingy.
You'll all have that come
Flip had a really cool code name. You would like make the mouse like a rainbow trail behind it and stuff.
That's awesome.
It's like so flip. Like let's make something musical.
I would really like it too. I think it'd be really great if it does like a case study, like just telling them. My only concern is that like, and it was a concern that you had too, which is like, I was intro talk on ActionCable. And then, I mean, even though his is more like ActionCable and React.
Maybe if you're doing the second, third touch point. You've done React, you activate the night, the next month you activate winter.
I had people ask me about it on Twitter.
And I figured out also like, you know, if anybody, missed this, then they can also like, oh, in June we're still gonna talk about it. Yeah, okay.
I know he's a little bit nervous. Junior, pretty sure he did it wrong. I'm pretty sure he did it wrong too, but that's fine. He still got it working. Be a good
And it
step.
was super fast when I saw it.
Oh yeah, performance was cool.
I was seriously like, I had to admit that like, I wanted to do something like, just use Rails 5 API and then like talk to like a React native and like build an app. Like that's what I wanted to do, but I was like, there's no way I'm gonna have time to figure that out. When I saw this project, I was like,
I spent some time working on building a Elm library to talk to ActionCable,
yeah.
and I gave up that. It wasn't Elm that was the problem. Making it type safe and immutable, that was getting it to work actually full time. ActionCable wants everything in a very particular format. I couldn't figure out. At least for the 3 hours I've been working on it.
Right.
After 3 hours, I'm like, I'm done.
I can easily see sinking 3 hours into that. How long ago was that?
So like I got it to connect, I was receiving messages fine, but sending messages, some of the security stuff they were doing, because I wasn't like using any of the,
It's like the core stuff?
I don't know if it was the core stuff, because because I wasn't using any of the ActionCable JS, I was using all just my own Elm file JavaScript, and using their port system, I was like, it wants this structure, and be like, oh, you define message of this type, like it wants to send it this way. No, now you're not giving me this other piece. And if I knew if I just gave it all the pieces they wanted, it'd be fine.
I'm not familiar with what's the
Elm is Haskell that compiles JavaScript, basically.
Okay.
So it's a strongly typed, statically compiled language that's super fast, targets JavaScript. It's from the ML language family, so it's very Haskell inspired. I think the compilers are very Haskell. But I downloaded Haskell on the device, and I just keep on running it.
So, if there was a, if there was a that implemented the ActionCable, would be able to take it off? Compiling it there? Because not so much.
You should be able to. There are different ways of using JavaScript with, or using JavaScript library with Elm. They have a system called ports, and basically in your Elm code you say, this is the function I'm going to call in JavaScript, and in JavaScript you write some code that converts to the port. So you need a wrapper, of some sort to translate between the two. But actually, it's fine. Mine, when I a year ago was trying to write a whole bunch of stuff in Opal, just having to write wrappers around everything just to get Opal to work correctly. Right. Otherwise, you end up writing your entire Ruby app in backticks for JavaScript.
That sounds very curious.
It was. Yeah, I remember the Opal guy was trying to get me to talk about it after I wrote a new webkit app in Opal that put a little like weather icon in my menu. That was fun. Yeah. Like, I'm like, Opal. Ruby JavaScript compiler.
You said Opal, and I'm like, what about Opal Divides?
Yeah. No, nothing else. Never again. I probably actually, no, I know how to go to a bar now.
How are things?
Last day.
Good. Where's he off to?
He's doing
Oh, really? Is he staying here doing it, or?
He'll be in New York for Q2 training. He will stay here. So Jess took over his job this whole time.
I didn't know he was actually. I have a spot for a senior JavaScript developer.
He really wanted to get there. I'm trying to offer somewhere else.
I would work in Java. The lead designer for Java. A buddy of mine that I tried to hire for design moved to New York, no job. 2 weeks later, was hired on Fog Creek. That's really good. 6 months later, they launched Trello, and he was the lead designer. So he was responsible for that interface.
He is the one.
Yeah,
Depending on how you put the emphasis on that stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, hello.
Hi.
Hello. How's everyone? Awesome. So welcome to Austin on Rails, May 2016 edition. There is plenty of pizza. Please feel free to grab some. And we're gonna get started here. So real quick, just the agenda. How many of you, this is your first Austin on Rails? Sweet. Awesome. Welcome. Glad to see you here. So just to give you a little bit of a breakdown of kind of how we do things here, we're going to do a quick just round of announcements. We're going to have one talk. Our first talk is going to be Justin. He's going to be talking about how to hire and keep junior devs. Then we're going to do a quick break so you can grab another pizza, another drink, go to the bathroom, which, by the way, the bathrooms are through that door and then to the right, and then you should see the signs to go to your respective bathroom. And then we're also going to do a raffle. Today, we're going to be raffling Advanced Rails by O'Reilly. Whoa! Thanks, O'Reilly.
It has a zebra on it.
It does have a zebra on it. It's pretty cool. And then during that break, if you are looking to hire people, how many of you are looking to hire? Sweet. How many of you are looking for gerbs? Cool. Okay, so during this break, we'll designate an area as like hiring sort of meet and greet. Probably over here or over here, wherever, whatever works. And then that way y'all can see if it's a fit. And then after that, we're gonna have our second talk by Nathaniel over here on ActionCable. I'm very excited. And then once everything's wrapped up, we're gonna head on down to BD Riley's, which is literally like a block away. You can follow everybody. If you're new, just follow the crowd. Can't miss it. And we'll have a tab open there, which leads me to thanking our sponsors. First off, huge thanks to Condé Nast for our food sponsorship. And then also, just walking in through the door, huge thanks to One More Cloud for sponsoring socialization practice. You'll hear from them towards the end of the meetup. But for now, Travis from Condé Nast, would you like to say a few words?
Sure.
Do I only get a few?
As many as you want.
Done.
You get your quota.
So who here knows what Condé Nast is or who Condé Nast is? Awesome. Okay, keep your hands up if you don't mind for a second. Okay, who here reads The New Yorker? You can keep your hands up too. You don't have to put them down. Ars Technica, Wired. These are the brands that Condé Nast owns. We've got 21 different brands across all segments of lifestyle. Our headquarters and heart is in New York, but we're opening an office here in Austin, and I'm heading that up. And I wanted to sponsor tonight just to let everybody know that we're here in town. I am hiring. I'll talk more about that later, but if you're looking, definitely come talk to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Yay, thank you, Condé Nast, for pizza. Yay. So, towards the end of the meetup, we'll hear from One More Cloud. They are sponsoring our socialization practice. So they have been generous enough to open up a tab for us at BD Riley's. It's gonna be awesome. Thank you so much, I really appreciate it. So without further ado, I will introduce Justin.
Oh.
For the first talk.
Hello, how's everyone doing? All right, so I've talked a few times, but rarely with a microphone, so if I start trailing off like this, just yell at me, okay?
That's a nice desktop.
Isn't it? I lost my extra window, where did it go?
Is it full screen?
Yeah,
I saw Google Chrome hiding in full screen.
over here. Where did it go? Oh, yeah, there it is. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Now I All right, everything seems to be working. How's everyone doing tonight? Pretty good. All right, well, thank you all for coming out. And I'm going to be talking about hiring and keeping junior developers at whatever company that you work for. So who I am is Justin, that is me. I'm a developer. I'm also a teacher. I currently work for the Iron Yard here in Austin, which is an intensive 12-week boot camp. Before that, and currently on the side, I still do software development, software consulting, contracting, stuff like that to keep my skills sharp. Sometimes I look like this, sometimes like this, more recently like this. But in general, I'm making that face and awesome tweets like this, which are actually not readable. But I had to go through and find something else to put on there. So I think the first thing that's going to be coming up in anyone's head who does do hiring is why you should listen to me tell you what to do with your company and how your team should operate. And the truth is you shouldn't. Like, don't just listen to anyone who stands on a stage and tells you how to do things. This entire talk is really just suggestions and best practices. This is really just something that I have come to kind of know and learn over the years of hiring juniors and mentoring juniors and now teaching them, things that can help your organization. And I really want this whole talk to be open to discussion. So I don't really care if anyone yells at me, but if you have anything you don't care for, or have a disagreement about, we can talk about that. And hopefully I budgeted enough time to do that and still let talk about ActionCable exist afterwards. I was telling them earlier, the talk is somewhere between 10 and 50 minutes, so let's try to hit the middle ground there. All right. So the first thing we should go over is that, kind of a disclaimer. Hiring junior developers is not a silver bullet for any problem that your company or your team has. In general, it takes work, but I can assure you that the work it takes is generally worth it. As someone who has worked on teams with all seniors and with a mix of juniors and with all juniors, it is really valuable to have them on your team. So one of the list of requirements that I've kind of come up with here is if your team or if your company would like to start hiring junior developers, the very first thing you're going to need to have is an advocate. And hopefully after this talk, that'll be you for your company. But it needs to be someone. If no one in your company really wants to have junior developers, it doesn't matter what I say here, you're not going to have them, right? Someone needs to vouch for it. The same reason someone needed to vouch for Rails when you were all doing .NET and Java, and someone needed to vouch for testing or anything else that you actually want to be able to do in your company. And the second couple things some developers kind of bristle at, which is you're going to need some procedures and you're going to need some processes. Now, this isn't saying you need to turn your awesome agile 3-person shop into a bureaucracy with paperwork and other things and responsibilities that you have to do all the time. All this is saying is basically you need to write shit down. Like, you need to have a system in place for what to do when the build goes down. How do you deploy to production? What is the process for code review? How do you take someone from junior to senior? These are all things that everyone in this room is capable of doing and probably honestly knows how to do, but writing it down is kind of the difference. I think there's that great quote from Adam from the Mythbusters. He says the difference between screwing around and science is writing it down afterwards. That's kind of how it is with software as well. Like, you can be an awesome developer and have an awesome team, but until you write things down, it's not sustainable and it's not scalable. And a lot of the discussions I've had with employers and with other people who run businesses is basically they're running into a scaling issue. They want to hire juniors, but it seems like it's too hard. They're not quite sure what to do to fix that problem. So they just jump for another senior because they know that works because that's their current team. I talked with a company at RubyConf, a really great company, who was telling me they really want to hire juniors, but they're not quite sure what to do. Like, they're scared they might break something. And we talked for a few minutes, and basically what they were coming out to say was that they have a 5-person team, all seniors, all been there since they started the company, and they all have push rights to production at any given moment. I was like, well, yeah, that's kind of scary. I wouldn't put a junior in that environment either. But maybe we can figure out a middle ground. Maybe we can have some procedures in place for how do you deploy? What are the pre-steps that you all intimately know that someone else might not know? All right, so keep going down this train. In general, these are the benefits that I like to think of when it comes to, can anyone read that? Okay, looks a lot smaller than I thought it was going to be. To basically hiring your own junior developers is that you get to grow your own developer. You get to shape them and make them do and know everything you want them to know. Do you want a developer that only knows ES6? Then you could do that yourself. Basically, I have seen teams run with people who grew up as developers, only learning functional programming and TDD. And they became extremely proficient functional programming TDD developers because that's what they were taught from the time they were onboarded into the company. And that allows them to have a different perspective on the team. I wish I had more time to come up with the actual citations for this, so just assume my entire slide or entire talk has a citations needed around it, which is, there are studies behind these things, I just didn't do the work to look them up. That if you have a more diverse team, I think we can all agree that we have some issues with diversity in tech in general. I'm just going to assume you're all nodding, because you are. We do have problems. One way to address that will be with who you hire and how you hire. And if we stick to the same methods of hiring the way we were hired, it's going to make that process hard to change course. And one things we can do is, if you are hiring junior developers, you can shape the way you want your company to grow and you want your culture to grow. You can take a more active approach to that. Just to kind of go over these last couple ones here. Junior developers in general have fewer bad habits that they have to unlearn. They'll probably have a few, but they won't be ingrained for 5 years in them, so it's easier to get them to comply with the way you do things and the way your process works. There's less issues with ego. I don't know a developer that doesn't have a problem or doesn't have a story of a company they worked with where the two senior devs hated each other. And none of them quit, they just continue to do the work there and make everyone else's life miserable. Those are things that you could potentially avoid hiring more junior developers. And this last one is really important for me, or rings true with me, because I actually gave a whole talk just on this last bit, which is mentoring and teaching junior developers. Inside of a company that values mentoring and values teaching, you see benefits not just for those juniors, but for those intermediate developers and those senior developers. They get to focus on what do they actually know, how can they impart that knowledge basically onto a quote-unquote new generation of developers. They get to clarify and double down on the things that they already know. And this gives them something other than the work they do day to day that they can be engaged in. I don't know if anyone here is involved in the Twitter discourse, but recently there was some tweets going on about, I think like self-conf or selfie-conf, and someone posted this really good slide about the reasons why people get burnt out. And what was really interesting about this slide, and I'm sorry I didn't take the picture to show everyone, was of the 6 reasons they listed for people having burnout at companies, only one of them was hours worked. In general, you have to feel engaged, you have to feel you have to feel like you're a part of the company you work for, you have to have a reason to go to work every day. And when you are mentoring and teaching someone else on your team, you have that engagement. You have that personal connection to someone else's growth in the career, and that pays dividends for you as a senior as much as it does for them as a junior. Sound good so far? Okay, cool. So the way I wanted to structure this was, from this point on, we'll go over some of the myths of hiring junior developers, which are basically what I like to call the why nots. When I talk to people and I'm like, so what is your company thinking? Are you hiring? What would you like to do in the future? These are the kind of things I hear. They're all going to be really generic simplifications. I understand that. That's not going to apply to everyone's company this equally. But these are just some common patterns I've seen and the ways to kind of address those. And hopefully it's a little bit clarifying or eye-opening for you all. And then I would like to touch on what the hiring process looks like how you can change the way you interview and the way you go through that process of hiring to make it better suited to not just to the juniors, but to your company as well, so you know what you're getting from your junior developer before you hire them. And then we'll touch on at the end the whole process of how to keep them engaged and how to keep them around afterwards. All right, so to start, companies only hire seniors. Companies only hire expert level developers. And this is just kind of the general mantra in our industry. And in general, if you talk to someone who's a junior or anyone who's not a senior, it's how do you become a senior if you can't get hired unless you are a senior? And you've got this like cyclical loop of like you're not sure how to get there if no one will let you get there, and it's very frustrating. And the reason why I think companies go to seniors is because they're a safe bet, is basically what it is. We know a senior can do this. A senior built the system we have. We can go to one and we can make sure this problem is solved the way we want it to be solved. The problem is senior developers, especially if they're happy at their current job, are hard to get to move. And that's why we have a large problem in our industry with hiring that top talent. So the way to kind of cheat the system is don't try to find top talent and get into poaching wars. Let the happy people work where they're happy. Grow your own happy people and invest in your own culture and your own company and be proactive internally instead of trying to hire from the outside. No one disagrees yet? Okay, that's good. So moving right along, there are a few like organizational misconceptions here that I've come across. Now, these are never explicit. These are just things that I have seen being exposed to dozens of companies that hire junior developers, and they fall into one of two camps. One is that junior developers are experts. They expect a very, very high level of expertise and basically productivity from the juniors, like first day on the job. And how this tends to manifest is those junior developers are, how do I put this? They don't have any validation of their own skills, so they're actually probably more talented than they think they are. And then a year into their job, they go, oh, I'm being severely underpaid, I should go. And then they jump to a job where they don't apply for a junior position. They apply for a intermediate or senior position somewhere else. And then the perception goes to the company, oh, don't hire juniors, they just leave after we train them for a year. But really what you did is you let them realize they weren't as bad or as low on the totem pole as they actually were. And what this has caused is at a lot of companies, a junior position is actually not junior. It's like right in the intermediate level. It's right before that cusp where they really want to level up in their career and jump to that next stage. So I think if we can address what the actual clear expectations are for a entry-level position in tech or at your company specifically, you can have a better understanding of how to grow that person and how to keep them there for the long term. So far, so good. All right. And the second one is the junior developers are interns, that they are useless and that they are just going to be in the way until they are actually skillful enough to actually apply to the team. So let's just make them do something off in the distance and not worry about them until we can deal with them later. And I've also seen this happen, and also not that great. So what I decided to do was kind of come up with a really generic taxonomy for senior developers versus junior developers. And it looks like this. So the way I kind of ran through this was senior developers can solve basically any problem you throw at them. They are capable of making their own technical decisions. They know when a solution is good enough. They know when a solution is overkill. They know, like, this is not how you should architect this. We really should not use WebSockets. Please no one use ActionCable. It's a horrible idea. And they also know what they don't know, right? Like, they can very clearly tell you, I don't know anything about Elasticsearch, but I'll look it up and we'll figure it out. Junior developers can also solve most problems if you actually let them. It might be a mess, it might be terrifying, it might take a while, but they could still do it. They're still developers. They still have that core that allows them to solve problems, but they need guidance. Junior developers need direction on technical decisions. They should not be in charge of picking your framework for your next project. A junior developer needs guidance and direction on if a solution is good enough or if it is overkill. They will solve a problem and then say, well, I solved it. I have no clue if this is good or bad. And that's fine, but they need that guidance. They need someone to tell them that was over or that was under the bar. Let's try to get you back where you should be. And junior developers are unsure about what they actually know. They know some things, but they don't know what they don't know. And what this really leads to is the reality of what a junior developer is. Now, this quote is way too small by Patrick McKenzie, and it says that every great developer you know got there by solving problems they were unqualified to solve until they actually did. And this also applies equally well to systems. Every system was built by someone who didn't know how to build it until they did. And I think we all apply in that. And I am this close, but I did cut the slide that said we were all junior developers once because it seemed a little too cheesy. All right, so this is the reality, kind of summing up the last couple slides that we live in. That junior developers can solve most problems using software, but they need some guidance around that. So the way I kind of put it here was junior developers need code reviews. They need pairing or some type of a review process. I know not everyone does like agile style pair programming. I come from a very heavy like XP background, so that's kind of embedded in the way I approach software development. They need to feel cared for. I mean, everyone needs to feel cared for, but it really helps when you're a new person on a team, new to a company, new to a career, because most junior developers, this is their entry level into this industry, even if they maybe have worked in a different department before. And they need to have clear expectations of their progress. They need to know, am I doing my job right, and am I doing it well? And all of this kind of lumps together. Like when they do those code reviews are not like, if you don't pass this bar, you're being punished. They're not a punitive code review. This is I want to encourage and correct and make sure you are doing well in the future. And I think actually Derek Pryor gave a talk here a few months ago or last year sometime about code reviews, and it was excellent. It was about how to do good code reviews. So all of this is to say junior devs need a mentor. That's what they need. They need someone who can be their accountability buddy to make sure that they are doing well in their career as they first get started. So the good news about that is your existing senior developers are your mentors. Everyone in this room, you are the mentor for your company and your team. So the bad news is you are the existing developers, you are the mentors for your team. So that means there is this double-sided coin where you as a senior get to train and teach these people coming on to be good at your company and good at what you do, but that also means you're going to be responsible for that process. So far, so good? All right. All right, so these are my last three. I'll kind of breeze through these here. So my team can't hire junior developers for one of these three reasons. My team is too small, my team is too busy, or what I do is too important to let a junior touch it. How dare they? So we'll kind of just breeze through what these basically mean. So if your team is too small, you're basically saying, how in the world can I mentor someone? There's only 3 of us in the development team. And that to me is actually super exciting. With 3 people, 3 senior developers, a 3-to-1 ratio from a senior to junior, that's amazing. Like they'll be the smartest, most proactive, most amazing and capable junior in 6 months. Really size, as far on the small scale, is not a limiting factor when it comes to hiring a junior developer onto your team. And actually, this goes back to that talk I gave about mentoring at companies. Mentorship styles come in many different forms, and a 1-to-1 ratio is like a classic mentor apprenticeship, where you are taking someone who is the craftsman, craftswoman who is in charge, who has the senior level knowledge, and they are imbuing that into their apprentice, this person they've hired on to learn and grow at the company. Once you get to larger scales, things get kind of crazy. 1-to-5 ratio, it's kind of like teachers and students. 1-to-15, managers and peons. I would hate to work at a company where it's 1 senior to 15 juniors. I don't think anyone's advocating that, so I think we're okay. All right, so now we get to the fun ones. My team is too busy to mentor. Okay, Like, I don't have anything to say. Like, if your team's too busy, you're too busy. That honestly is the case. Like, that's true, because there's probably something else happening organizationally at your company if you can't devote a few hours a week to helping someone else on your team. And so that's really out of the scope of this talk. But I would love to talk one-on-one about what we could do to help your company, or at least your team as developers, reprioritize things to find what actually is the issue there. Because in a lot of discussions I've had with teams, it's really an issue of priorities. They know what they need to do, but they don't feel like they have time to do it. If you are still on Rails 2 point something or 3 point whatever, and you want to get up to a newer version, that's something that I think a senior should be handling, not a junior. But if you're just trying to sling through all of the new HTML and CSS changes as fast as possible, maybe you could reprioritize that. Maybe you find out, okay, this might be slower to have a junior do it, but that allows me as the senior developer to focus on the future of the company, to focus on the tech stack we want to have, to focus on the things that need improvement immediately that obviously a junior developer is not capable of doing at this moment. So it's just, I think it's a little bit about just being cognizant of changes you can make organizationally and how you can approach problems. Not too controversial? Okay, cool. All right. My work is too important. There's no way I could trust a junior with this. This is kind of similar to the last one. If you say that, I'm not going to argue with you. I've never found this to be true, but if that's what you say, like, that is your reality, so it must be true. It comes back again to priorities and how you want to approach your work and how you want to spend your time. With proper processes in place, because this tells me, if someone tells me that they can't trust a junior developer in their system, is that there are no safety locks, that there's no guardrails, that there's no bumpers on the sides, that there's no procedures in place, that there's no tests. That they can't trust that any code they write will get through and be okay. And that normally means they don't have code reviews in place. They don't have these other systems, because ultimately junior developers do need structure when they work anywhere. And honestly, everyone benefits from some structure, but having that when you don't have it is kind of the first step. So like step 0, analyze your strengths and weaknesses as a team and see where you can improve so that you can bring people in to lessen the load on you individually. Good? 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 All right. So let's move on to the fun stuff. So actually hiring junior developers. Interviews, whiteboards, and code reviews. Okay. So my plea to everyone today is if you were hiring a junior developer today, tomorrow, or in the next 50 years, that you set expectations up front and very clearly for them. And this actually is not exclusive to junior developers, this is for anyone, which is, what do you want from them throughout this process? And how many steps are there? Is this a 3-part interview? Is this a 7-part interview? At my job currently at the Iron Yard, we are revamping our entire onboarding/hiring process for instructors because it was nebulous and no one ever knew that we actually had an 18-part process and they were only 3 through whatever. And it made it very frustrating for these people applying and interviewing and interviewing and interviewing. Setting those expectations can help them out. Remember that a lot of these people, especially juniors, are coming in to this industry for the first time. They don't know what this process looks like. Helping them know what to expect will make the whole process cleaner for them and for you. All right, so interviewing techniques. This is where I get to stand on a soapbox that I'm already on and yell at everyone. So less trivia in general. It is super cool that you know the difference between a proc and a block and a lambda. But it doesn't really matter 99.8% of the time. And I could spout more trivia, but I don't want to do it on the spot because I'll get it wrong. In general, if you are hiring through trivia, or at least if that's a key component of how you weed people out through your interview, the incentive there is for juniors to study for the test. They are trying to then, I have to memorize a bunch of trivia to actually get through this screening process. And what that ends up doing is you're basically said, you're getting people to try for the test, but you're also adding in a bit of randomness to how people get hired that you cannot quantify or be analytical about when you try to look at what's affecting your culture in the long run. So this is the, did I spell those words correct? Yeah, I guess so. So less algorithms and data structures. I think these are still important. I actually still do ask these types of questions when I interview people, but these are not, specifically for a junior developer, these are not make or break questions. Yeah, I'll ask them what a binary search is, and they should be able to implement one and understand it, and they should understand stacks and queues and double linked lists. But if they don't know, how do I explain it to them and see how long it takes them to understand the concept? These are the questions you have to ask yourself. Is this something they will be using day to day on the job? If it's not, maybe it shouldn't be in the interview, or it shouldn't be that hurdle they have to jump over to at least be qualified, right? I think I like to use these as, okay, what's the data structure you don't know? Good. Now I'm going to explain to you how it works, and I want to see how you would visualize implementing that data structure in Ruby. I want to know, how does your brain think about these new different ways of solving problems, more than I want to know you actually paid attention in a CS class, or you decided to read that Wikipedia page if you were self-taught or a code school grad. Which, coincidentally enough, I was a self-taught developer, and that's what I did. I just read Wikipedia on everything, because I thought I had to actually, land a job forever ago. So along the same lines, I think this might be, pretty self-explanatory. Whiteboarding is still good. They all say less. They don't say zero, never, none. They just say these should be less. These should be lower on the priority list. Whiteboarding is quick and easy and available, but it is not always the best assessment of someone's skills. Another citation needed. There was a great study, I think it probably came up on my Twitter feed on Hacker News, about how your brain enters different processing modes when you are standing on a whiteboard versus when you are sitting. And there are countless studies on how memory recall is strongest when you're in the same environment that you are in when you study. So a junior developer, the majority of their study has been sitting in a dark room by themselves with their computer in front of them in their lap. And you're going to make them write code with their back facing a room of senior developers with a whiteboard in front of them and a marker in their hand and no Google anywhere near. And they're just going to shake and then not actually code to the quality or to the level they actually can. And I think everyone who's hiring wants to actually get down to what can this person actually do, not what can I force out of them in an already stressful setting. And now this might be, again, just more my own perception on things, but I don't believe interviews or the entire interview process needs to be as adversarial as it ends up being. Everyone's kind of on the same page in the end. They want a job, you want to hire them, but only if they are qualified and only if you're someplace they want to work. So it can be, hey, I want to hire you, but I need to make sure you can do this because this is what we expect from you on the job. Hey, I want you to work for me, or I want to work for your company, but I want to make sure this is the place I want to work. And that interview process can really convey a lot. This kind of goes along the same lines, less reliance on jargon and acronyms. Jargon and acronyms they come from experience, basically. And I've heard developers say they want them to know these things because that's how they know they have experience. But if you're hiring an entry-level position, this will always be limited, and it goes back to the trivia idea. You're kind of filtering for people who have studied and don't understand it deeply, or people who just got lucky because they decided to build a project in MongoDB, or just download Elasticsearch. Not because they know it, but because they heard it was something cool they have to know. That doesn't get to how good of a developer they will be, right? All right. So I told you everything you can't do, and I'm not going to tell you what you should do. Figure it out. No. Okay, so these are my three favorite alternatives to the kind of traditional interview session, starting with a code review. So this would rely on you having to do a little bit of work up front. Luckily, you don't have to do this every time. You can come up, grab all your developers and spend an afternoon and come up with code that you would like people to review when they apply for jobs at your company. You give it to them, you could give it to them at the same time when they come out, you can give it to them ahead of time. I think it's better just to give it to them on the spot so you can see their initial reaction. And ask them, what do they like about this code? Does it suck? Like, is it JavaScript? What language is it in? If they had to write it themselves, would they do it differently? An important one, can they tell what it does at all? Right? Like, just show them code and be like, do you know what this code does? Could you explain it to me? What could be optimized? Is this not performant? Could it be written cleaner? They might not know how to optimize things, for big O of blank, blank, blank. That goes back to data structures and algorithms and algorithm efficiency. But do they know about solid? Do they know about dry principles? Do they know about how the log demeter? Like, should they try to figure out what they do and they don't know by having them be critical about a piece of code? Because that's something I would expect for every developer on my team to be able to do to some capacity. The second one is a code challenge review. And this is actually becoming pretty popular. I still think we need some work in the industry on like how to formulate the difficulty of a code challenge. This is actually something that coincidentally comes up a lot. My current job working at the Iron Yard, where we hire new instructors, and the first assignment they always give all of their students is way too hard and everyone cries. And they go, oh, that was hard? I didn't. And the assumed knowledge that we all have as senior developers is so deeply ingrained in us, we don't know what's in there that's really causing the problem. So isolating those variables is very important. So when you are setting a code review or a code challenge to someone, make sure you know the difficulty level of it going forward, so you know what to expect from them when it comes back. And this is going to look very similar to the last slide. So ask them to explain why they made all the decisions they did. Regardless of skill level, senior, mid, junior, any developer at a technical interview should be able to explain the quality of their code and why they made decisions they did. Even if it's, this line came from Stack Overflow. I mean, that sounds like a developer to me. But they should at least know why it's there, why they had to Google it, and what part were they stuck on. I believe very highly they should be able to know what they should do differently next time. Because if they don't have that critical eye, how are they going to know or improve code in the future? They shouldn't just say, yeah, that's perfect. There's no other way to write that. And the same thing, you should be optimized. What could be written cleaner? Running a little low on time, so let's go here. This is my personal favorite, but I think this is the hardest to pull off. So I'm not going to push it on you as a requirement. If you can find a piece of code in a side project, in an open source project that your company does on anything that's not NDA'd, bring them in for the normal review process and sit with them in pair and say, we are going to work on this feature together, and I want you to collaborate with me on building this. When you sit with them and you work together on a feature, you can actually get an understanding of what it will be like for this person to be on my team. Do I want to sit side by side with this person? In general, the best teams I've worked on have been teams where it's not someone I always want to get a beer with, but it's someone I enjoy working with because they give me new insight. I have a good collaboration with them. They communicate. Those are the things that I would like to look for. And how much can they accomplish if you let them drive that one part? So I've been typing for a while. I've been saying what I like to do. I want you to say how we should go from here. This can really help you understand their thought process and how they like to approach problems and how they would work on the job, where they would take logical conclusions of your existing code base. And I think the general thread of all of these is to have a conversation. So many interviews at any skill level end up becoming very one-sided. They end up becoming very much, I told them a bunch of things, they asked me questions, and it was over. And they don't know what's happening. Was it good? Was it bad? What did I do wrong? What did I do right? And I feel like I'm talking to people I know who hire, they don't know either. They just Googled how to hire a developer 5 minutes before the interview and then sat down and read through the list. And then they go, I don't know why we can't hire anyone. It's really weird. So I think it's really important to have that conversation with them. So far, so good? All right.
Do you have any generic advice on how to frame? Because I feel like a lot of times with interviews, especially, and this might be more of a generic interview question, but especially with juniors, it resonates with me what you're saying about it's okay for them to not know things. And part of interviewing a junior is understanding what they do and don't know. Do you have any advice on how to frame a conversation such that a junior developer understands it's okay to be, like, because when you're in an interview, you figure you're supposed to know everything, right?
Right.
It seems like that could be really tricky to do well.
Yeah, so how do you let a junior developer know it's okay for them not to know something in an interview? Yeah, it's really hard. There's no real, I don't think I'm perfect at it. In general, my interviewing style is to make it more relaxed, and that tends to help. I tend to say, hey, we're just going through this together. Like, it goes back to that setting expectations. If they know up front what you were looking for in this interview, there shouldn't be as much ambiguity about, oh God, I don't know this one thing. And sometimes I think it comes down to just breaking the silence. Like, you ask them a question, explain to me metaprogramming in Ruby, and they just freeze. And then, okay, metaprogramming, and they go, like what? I'm like code that writes code? Like, well, class eval? And then you're off their radar, right? You've just gone off. And I like to kind of throw them a bone, try to bring them back to a level of understanding by kind of telling them half of it and trying to get them to meet me halfway. That tends to help. And then move on normally to something else. And okay, good, I know I've reached this limit of your understanding. Let's find a different avenue and go there.
To have them talk about what they've done as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that goes back to the have a conversation thing. Like, talk to them about their past experiences. Talk to them about what they did before this job. Like, what are their things they're interested in? What makes them a good fit for this company? And what have they been working on recently? Because they all have some side project that they've toyed with. And it might not be a super advanced piece of technology, but it'll be something interesting you can jump off of. All right, so keeping junior developers. Yeah, so nothing is certain but death, taxes, and employee turnover. Hey, I got one. Okay. So eventually everyone leaves, but there are things we can do to kind of stave back the onslaught or the just constant carousel. I didn't put in here a comic, I think it was from the New Yorker actually, of some two businessmen arguing, and they said what would we do? What happens if we hire people and then we train them and then they just leave? And the other guy says, well, what would we do if we hire them and then we don't train them and then they stay? You're in a lose-lose situation. You need to accept the fact that if you train people, they may leave, but that's always a better alternative to letting them stay here untrained. It's investing in your culture, and people know when you invest in the team and when you invest in the employees you have, that's going to make them want to stay. So Amy Knight has a good quote here. If you don't want your juniors that you're investing in to leave, when they get better, then you should treat them from day one like you would after year one. And this goes back to, don't treat them like they're interns. Treat them like you are a valuable member of this team, even if you are so slow. Don't talk like that to them, you are valuable, and we hired you for a reason. We hired you because we are investing in your future. You hire juniors, especially on their trajectory, on their ability to learn, on their ability to progress and to become a valuable member of your team. You don't hire them because tomorrow they can implement the MySQL adapter that you need for some legacy system. That's not really what you should be hiring juniors for. So my set them up for success steps are to have clear goals. So much of this comes back to expectations. Have clear goals for their first 3 months, 6 months, and 1 year. And these in general are checkups. They're not really oh God, if you do not do this in 3 months, we're gonna sever your contract. But they are ways of having expectations. This is what I expect from you in these first 3 months. They know what goal they should try to hit. Same with 6 months, same with a year. You're knowing that this is a two-way investment. They're working very hard to level up, to be valuable on this team, and you are giving back to them. Along with what I said, just kind of accept that they are going to have a slower pace as they level up, because they are learning at the same time they are working. Everything they are doing for the very first time. So they will always be slower at it. This is why I definitely recommend you devote some of their time to pairing. Again, if your company does not do pairing, anything that kind of looks like it will do, have them just sit with other developers and just kind of watch them work, because that transfer of knowledge, I have never seen a better way of leveling up a junior than having them sit side by side with an intermediate or senior developer and just work together. It doesn't have to be their entire life. It doesn't have to be every day. Just they have to do that on a regular schedule and with different people so they can learn that part of the system and learn that person's tips and tricks and learn the way the way they know things then. It'll be much faster than making them do it on their own. All right, and have regular code reviews with someone they trust and respect. So code review should be happening all the time. I'm just going to assume every company just does that anyways, as I'm currently working on a contract for a company and they don't do any code reviews. But those are quality reviews, right? You're checking to make sure this, or they're acceptance reviews. You're making sure this does what it's supposed to do and it meets the requirements for quality. A code review that happens on a regular basis every month or every other month would be, hey, this is the basis of your work so far. I would like to see the improvements in these areas. These are things that I see you're lacking in. We should work on those. Again, this is about giving them direction for where to go next. They don't know where they need to improve necessarily, but just having that guidance can give them that ability to do that and to take that next step. All right, just a few more. Yeah, all right. So give them safety to fail. You have to let them push themselves. Again, this goes back to the idea of don't shove them in a corner and give them the part of the system no one likes and just say, there you go, that's what you deal with for the next 2 years. Because that's definitely a recipe for them leaving. If you just kind of shove them in a corner and that's all they ever get is whatever's over here that no one else likes. They're just saying, I'm gonna go someplace else where I'm the cool person that gets to shove other people over to the corner. Allow them to work with various members of the team. Brendan Hayes did a really good talk about career trajectories and where junior developers can go in their career. Your junior might find out they'd rather be a DevOps person and when they grow up. But if they don't get exposure to that team, they might feel like they have to leave your company to actually get a DevOps job. So giving them that exposure can really, really help your team and help them feel like they are like a valuable member of the team. This one's really important. Make sure your mentors are reviewed temporarily, occasionally. Bad mentors can really sour things for your organization. If you have someone in charge of making sure your juniors get trained and they're really bad at it, that'll just be really bad for everyone. So routinely watch the watchmen and make sure things are okay. And again, just as they're leveling up, give them more responsibility. Make sure they're constantly challenged and being pushed. A lot of the juniors I know who jump ship after a year or so is because this job's no longer challenging. They are still given the bare minimum of requirements day in and day out, and they have surpassed that. Their skill is well beyond that now, but they're not being treated as if they have actually gotten better. So far, so good? All right, so let's round out with some hot takes. So these are hot takes taken from various coworkers, mostly myself, and they're all very tweet ready. So if you want to just like take pictures of these, they're perfect. All right, junior developers do not need a sink or swim mentality. They don't need to be treated like children or excluded from the team. This is just more of what the whole talk was about in one nice sentence. You didn't really need to be here for the whole thing. You could have just read this and you were good to go. Just because you can do something in half the time doesn't mean it's what you should be working on as a senior developer. This goes back to the idea of there are things that are more important for a senior developer to do, even if they don't seem necessarily the most obvious. And I think that's what the next one is about. No juniors should ever be in charge of upgrading your system to a new major version. No junior should be in charge of upgrading their Rails 3 project to Rails 4 or Rails 5. Or overhauling your test suite, or re-architecting your database. Those are things that I think from almost every company, the life of your company depends on those being done well, and your seniors should do those. And what they were doing, some of that work, the juniors should be picking up the slack in that regard. Definitely encourage your entire team to pair. Make this be part of your system, part of the way your team works. That pairing is not only acceptable, but like highly, highly encouraged, required, that they do that so that they feel like they have a way of actually sharing what they're doing with these junior developers. Junior developers need structure, honest expectations, and room to grow. And I missed a slide transition here where it was gonna like cover up junior and just say developers, because honestly, this is everyone. Like every person needs this at any company they work for. And if you want to keep developers now and in the future of any skill level, this is what you need. You need to have a structure that supports them, gives them honest expectations, and allows them to grow in their career and as humans. Thank you. All right. I have 20 seconds for Q&A. Yes?
This actually might be more of a statement than a question.
I love those.
Yesterday I was at the Code Girl screening.
Mhm.
I don't know if you guys have seen it. If not, do watch it. I've seen it twice already. It's available on Netflix, Amazon Prime, all that kind of stuff. A vice chair of the Chamber of Commerce, Austin Chamber of Commerce, quoted that there are about 35,300 open jobs in Austin, mostly in tech.
Mhm.
So if they're not hiring junior developers, that might be the reason why there are 35,000 open jobs.
It's
So,
definitely a part of it. Yeah, and that's a part of the reason why I'm giving this talk, is because I talk to companies one-on-one, and we talk about why they do or don't hire junior developers, and we agree if they do hire juniors, this is a great idea. If they don't, oh man, we really should try it at least. And I'm like, wow, I can't talk to every company one-on-one. This will take a long time. So I thought maybe this was a small step in that direction, since now you're all my advocates. Yes. Yes.
If you had to
do.
put 3 bullets on a slide that was specifically about doing this with remote teams,
Mhm.
what would you put on that slide?
With remote teams, everything about expectations, and I think with remote teams, it's just kind of double down on expectations, double down on processes and procedures, and double down on communication. Like, when I used to work on a remote team with juniors, we basically turned Skype on and didn't turn it off till 8 hours later. Like, you would just talk. It was weird. After a week, you just felt like they were in the office because they were just always there on the other side of that microphone chatting with you. We used to do remote pairing sessions. The technology's gotten better. Before, we used to do like reverse HTTP proxies into like an Amazon S3 to do like Vim. It was a pain. Plus, you had to get your juniors to learn Vim, so that was also a pain. That was a steep learning curve for their first week. But it did allow for that process to happen. So yeah, I would say just you have to double down on all of those things so it's very clear. Anything? Anyone? Yes.
So also not a question.
Oh, I love this. This is great.
So thank you for the dog. I thought that was great. I think like amazing work. If anybody here is hiring and you happen to be interviewing me and you ever put me in front of a whiteboard, I will make you whiteboard something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, explain in more detail the scenario where you guys could act it out in your chat. Like, of how exactly it would go down.
Yeah. How does this mind trick work? You make them do the
You're
whiteboard.
like you're like, hey Richard, you should write a doubly linked list. And I'm like, okay, but just so you know, we need to have 30 minutes left over at the end of this interview because I have some questions for you.
I like that.
I don't recommend actually doing that.
Yeah. If you want a job, don't do that.
Actually raise them. See who would do the doubly linked list first.
No, you do it.
Which type of notation you use?
Yeah. Just do the whole thing in procs like that one Tom Stewart talk. Yeah.
Question for you and for other senior developers who do interviews here in the room that I'd be curious to know, like, how would you deal with this? Because sometimes you go on an interview and the person interviewing you is asking you questions to feed their own ego. I don't know if this has ever happened to anybody. How do you deal with that?
Leave.
Different person to interview with.
Yeah, I think in general, there's just those people still exist, and everyone knows that person. They worked with them at one point. I've definitely been at meetups where someone's bragging about how they just crushed someone during an interview. I'm like, that's not your job. Your job is to try to hire someone, not like break their soul in the process. Like, I talked to some companies. One guy talked about how he wanted to know. He always made Rails. People applying for a Rails job, he made them explain to him prototypical inheritance in JavaScript. And I asked why. He said, oh, just because they should know it. I'm like, well, your company has a lot of legacy JavaScript. Oh, no, we don't do any of that. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, that's so pointless to like make people have to do something completely arbitrary for what your job actually is. But, you know, there's that.
One thing I'll say to that, and as much as Richard teased about it, one thing I've learned, because I would call myself maybe an intermediate developer, but I'd say, I've gotten to where now, like, honestly, I will but I will show up to an interview with a list of rather pointed questions about the job I'm applying for. And because I think one thing, having been a junior has been hired into roles and things, and now kind of matured, there's such a tendency when you're a junior to clamor for any job you can get your hands on, right? Like, oh my goodness, I got my foot in the door, because like I got my first job because a friend introduced me, kind of vouched for me, and it's like I got my foot in the door. I will say whatever I think I need to say to please these people to get this job. And one thing I've learned is that you can learn far more than you probably think about what it will be like to work at a company in the interview process as a candidate. And I've gotten to where every time I interview, I show up with a list of more and more pointed questions, asking specifics about, not only like how's it going to be to, like what are the benefits, all that kind of stuff, but then like what's it like to work with this team? Like how does the team interact? What's something the team has fought about recently? Like a lot of those kinds of things. I turn a lot of those back around, and what I found is that if I'm in an interview where I'm just watching a senior developer kind of, puff off his chest and tell me all the things he knows, I will keep that last little bit short and sweet, because by then I will already determine that this is probably not a person I want to work with. And I think that there are a lot of jobs out there, like you said,
35,000.
Yeah, there are 35,000 of them. So like, if you're in a situation where you already feel like I'm having to kind of put on a weird mask to make this person happy to try to get this job, like that, I would imagine that if you got that job, it would be not all that different than the interview, and you're going to be doing a lot of that in the job. And there exist companies out there where you don't have to do that.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely something I like to try to impart to my students at this current job at the Iron Yard, because you don't want to work at a horrible job. Like, you just don't want to. It's not worth it. I've definitely done that. Throughout my career, I've been really lucky and privileged to be able to do exactly that. Like, as I apply for more and more jobs, just be like more and more shitty, I guess is the best way to describe it. Like, when I applied I didn't apply. When the Iron Yard approached me to work for them, I said, code schools suck. Why would I work for you? And then just made them scramble to like give me a good reason why I should work for them. And they gave a very convincing argument. And they were like, well, you should meet the students, and we can go over that. But that was like basically where I was at that point in my career. Yeah, and I remember being a junior and being like, oh God, please, yes, I'll do anything. Just, yeah. I remember I've had the interviews where someone reviewing my code just looks up and goes, why are you wasting my time? And then looks back down. I'm like, oh my God, not only are they not gonna hire me, they're going to kill me after this. They were a joy to work with for 3 years. Okay, we're good. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. So next up, we're gonna take a break, and then also we're gonna start the Raffler thingy. So if you don't know Raffler, it's this thing where you just come in here, just write down your name, and then it should just do like a new line, and then that's a new entry. So just if you're interested in the book that we have giving away today, which is Advanced Rails, it's an O'Reilly book, just write down your name, and then we're gonna figure out who wins here in a bit. So go grab some pizza. We'll do 15 minutes. If anybody is hiring or looking for work, let's gather over here and use that time to talk and network. And we'll be right back.
How many times can I enter?
Is there a URL to that? Where do we go?
Just come up here.
I can't read it.
Come up here.
Oh, there's no WebSocket thing, no ActionCable?
No. Maybe that's going to be Raffler 2.0.
What's that?
If it was a website, I would have designed it by now.
I always like tell myself I'm gonna like look it up and try to use it.
Just take a picture of it right now.
Yeah.
Just take a picture of it right now. Yeah. I don't think. I think it's just a one instance thing. This looks like. Why even use Heroku for something like this?
Yeah.
It's like overkill.
You do it all the time.
This is beer. It's mosaic. Hops are great. It's a mosaic hop. I mean, I don't.
You guys hiring or leaving? I'm hiring. I think it's probably one of the best things that I ever did. Just started doing it about a year. I had to see like Rails, front end, like JavaScript, front end, back end. It helps level. For all the reasons you mentioned, like you do this, and you don't write stuff down. You can I'll talk more later. Apparently, I like
My biggest, like, why I would be trying to that takes, 30 minutes of my time. And then, I have it could be amazing.
The reason why I'm like I like to issue
that was a great
and there's like
we will go as we can talk anyway, so yeah.
What kind of it's like
So for the summer here now,
how can I like, you know, it's almost like I'm gonna put $50 down if I don't think
we make it like really
whatever that first matter
you don't have to go all in like these other services do like stickers like wrap all that up.
Well, then you don't have to worry about the nature there's a data.
There's no way like
like some process of tracking every single visitor and figuring out like what company they're to working on that. Let me show me this start it out. What do you guys do?
And that's a lot of
Or like the CTO jump the stage and hire junior developers. The words cannot celebrate. Past the situation yeah, that was after they like, so what happens?
I see the only person you talk about basically, this was before like they used to run a bar tab, and like so ActionCable people buy it. And then let me buy it. I'm like, alright, and then we like close down the place, they like sat in the sky. Yeah, I'm sure. Like I got so I was in like just the technicality. I already have the job. Yeah, and they like set me up. And he asked that, he was like, tell me what you know about better. And I'm like, what? And he's like, what is the definition of better? You're a dude. Yeah, and then like gave me some days, like I got left like now write this code and like left I have no idea.
That's how I approach it. I've never had a other than the fact that it's kind of like we have to figure out how do we make sure it doesn't do more shit. I'm trying to implement this
And Miles,
the bar is so low.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like an entire NPC company and like a tax or something. It's like all these interviews and the company entirely. What he wants to build software to help them. And like really just him and a few other people. Yeah, basically so he can like push stuff to his clients and like instead of just him actually doing any one or two times a day, like he can send out a video and stuff like that.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't like so I'm very excited.
So my team's a little rough. It's basically been like like Richard might have bought it. No, right. I give you a great idea. That's my point exactly. So that's exactly what happened. I was like, listen,
Stop that to do a collection and spend it like 50, 70 times and then it's the same rate. So we'll be able to Rails app and mobile app, which just talks to the Rails app, like the Rails standards, like we would have QR codes that would print out basically the ID of it in the Rails database, and then slap it on the site, and they would scan it, and then say, I inspected it, and that was like, system. So it's probably really low ball. A lot of people say real scope. That was a wild project.
Yeah.
and it's like the complete opposite of the story. They just like,
I'm actually going to be in the yard.
yeah, basically, yeah, I another reason why I'm so happy with that. Yeah.
So let's go ahead and, yes, totally. Let's go ahead and wrap up the conversation, sit back down, get ready for the next talk. I want to make sure we leave enough time for questions. So let's see who is going to be the winner of our book. Start the raffle. Who's Rob Zombie?
Rob Zombie's actually here. That's me.
Come on, Zebra.
The suspense. Oh. All right. Jem. Cool. You want your book? And once again, thank you, O'Reilly, for donating the book. It's awesome. So before we get started with the talk, I did want to take a second for all of us to give a round of applause to Schneems over here, who recently was named Ruby Hero at RailsConf. So thank you, Schneems, for all the work that you do for the community. We all definitely appreciate it. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and get started with the next talk, and stay tuned afterwards to discuss socialization practice.
All right, hey everyone.
Howdy.
So tonight we're going to talk about ActionCable, which is, I think, is considered Rails 5's flagship feature. And so I've titled it Gone in 60 Milliseconds because ActionCable lets you add in some really nifty real-time functionality to your Rails app with a surprisingly few lines of code. But before we get started, I'm Nathaniel Jones. I like Rails a lot. I've played around with some other technologies and worked with a lot of other technologies, but I always come back to Rails. So that led me to investigating ActionCable pretty thoroughly. By day, I'm a developer at Scout RFP. We're down on the 5th floor. And we're making procurement better, which actually sounds kind of boring, but you got all of these Fortune 500 companies who are purchasing millions or tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars worth of things like, snack cups. And they're doing it all with email and spreadsheets. They have no visibility whatsoever into how they are spending tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. So we're kind of like a SaaS product. We get it all into a SQL database, and then we can do really, really cool comparisons for them on how they can save money and spend money faster. So basically, every day I get to overhear a story from customer service about how some name brand that you guys probably all know saved anywhere from 5 to 7 figures in an hour thanks to the power Rails and SQL. So it's super fun. So on to ActionCable. What is ActionCable? I had a brief heart attack out of the corner of my eye. Did I misspell ActionCable? But I'm good. So ActionCable is a collection of it's the framework inside the Rails framework for adding in WebSockets and functionality and real-time functionality to your Rails app. So what are WebSockets, right? It's a completely different communication protocol from what we do most of the time with Rails, which is over HTTP. We've got REST, create, read, update, delete, all that good stuff. So the best way I've found to visualize it for myself is like regular HTTP is like sending a postcard, right? Like every time you send a postcard, you've got to write the address where you want it to send. You got to write your note, and it's got to be like routed through the post office, and then the other guy gets it, right? So every time we send an HTTP request, we've got all the headers, where's it going to go, and like here's our message, and here's all this good stuff. And then WebSockets is like a telephone call. You just got like this like direct, instantaneous connection to the other end, right? So if you think about it, WebSockets are really turn the internet into a series of tubes.
Yes.
So maybe, you know, they're full of cats, but what if it really was a series of tubes and this guy just had it like figured out a long time ago? Or maybe not. So I would say that if you have a existing Rails app, right, and it's kind of like what we think of a more classic Rails, like Basecamp or GitHub or something like that. It's not a single page application. Then ActionCable is going to help you quickly sprinkle in WebSockets into your app and add in some really neat functionality with hopefully only a little bit of head scratching. And so kind of one of the things I mulled over when I was looking into this was, if WebSockets is so much faster than HTTP, and we kind of got this persistent connection that happens almost instantaneously, like the next question then becomes like, WebSocket all the things, right? Like why don't we just communicate everything over WebSockets and knock out the post and the get and all that stuff? So we would be leaving behind a lot of the upsides that we built into HTTP over the years, right? So we've got caching and routing and gzip. Those are all very much solved problems with create, read, update, delete apps. And so that's where, like, if you look at Basecamp, they're using WebSockets. Like most of their app, you load the page over HTTP, and they've got their caching, they've got their gzip, they've got all their routing figured out, and then they sprinkle in a little bit of stuff. Like somebody posts a comment, somebody else posts a comment, and then boom, that's going to show up immediately, and that's happening with ActionCable. That's happening with WebSockets, just that little additional piece of functionality.
Wait, you can do that?
The WebSockets only.
What about Action Line Controller? Server side.
All right, so I want to start diving into the components that make up the ActionCable framework, because there's actually quite a few moving parts. But I guess before I do, just like WebSockets kind of makes sense. You guys have any questions? All good? Okay. So I spent like an hour trying to make an amazing diagram with some online tool or whatever, and it didn't go very well. So I was like, I got this, and I got out a Sharpie and I took a picture with my phone. So here we are. So this is our ActionCable server, right? So I mentioned the ActionCable is a collection of several different components and moving parts, but we're kind of looking at it at a higher level here. And our ActionCable server, it has those WebSocket connections, those persistent connections to a couple different browsers here. Like 2 browsers, that's all ActionCable can support. You want any more than that, you have to look at Node. So we got 2 up there, and then up here we've got our monolith app, M for monolith. That's our Rails app probably. And then over here maybe you've got some like microservices and stuff too. So those could talk to your ActionCable server as well if you wanted to, and we'll cover that in a little more detail later on. So high level, ActionCable is connecting your browsers, your front-end clients, with all your back-end app and all of your business logic. All right, so let's dive into the two of the main components of the ActionCable server here. So on the left we have the actual server. So this is gonna you can run this a few different ways, but it's got a port. It listens on a port or listens mounted inside your actual Rails app, and it's maintaining the connections, the WebSocket connections with your browsers, like on Firefox or Chrome or whatever, and Internet Explorer. God help you. And then inside here, we've got a pub sub system running. So, who's familiar with like a pub sub? Yeah, okay. So, the reason that we need this guy, right, is because if we only had one app, we had one instance, or if we only even had just one app and they're all like 16 threads inside the app, we could get away with just the server talking directly to all the browser connections, right? Because it can, it has access to all of the connections. But we're probably going to spin up, multiple dynos, multiple processes, multiple servers. We might have some microservices over here. So this pub sub layer here is taking care of saying, all right, I'm receiving all these messages from the app, and I'm going to communicate them to the browsers. And in reverse as well, the browsers say, hey, I got this new message, and they communicate it to the server. They've got that persistent connection, and then it swirls around here, and it can send it back to the app where it needs to go. Questions?
What's a pub sub?
Publish, subscribe.
Yeah, publish, subscribe. So
That'd be Redis, Redis is actually a fundamental part of it behind the scenes. But you could do it with Postgres too. It has a pub sub model in that as well. But that's the persistent layer underneath it all.
yeah, exactly. So you've got a couple of different engines you can plug in there. It's, I guess you call it a design pattern. Like it's also implemented in a lot of different ways, but ActionCable is using Redis's pub sub out of the box generally. So it's basically like, hey, I like you and I want to subscribe to your newsletter, and then the newsletter shows up. So I mentioned that we had the browsers talking to the ActionCable server over the WebSockets, right? But on the front end, you're going to have, of course, some JavaScript that's handling like receiving messages and sending messages back. That's how we have to deal with programming on the front end. So ActionCable comes with some CoffeeScript tool, a CoffeeScript framework and some tools for quickly generating that and building that out. So one of the common questions I got was, well, but I'm building it out in React, or I want to use a different tool, or I'm not using the Rails front end way of doing things.
does that mean like ActionCable isn't for me? And so the thing that I really like about ActionCable is that all of the components are easily, you can swap them in and out pretty easily. So you kind of get like a full package, like, hey, this works, use it. And then you can kind of replace the pieces in the engine until you get what you want. So if you don't like the front end, or you're building it out in React or something else, you can npm install ActionCable-JS, and this guy has re-implemented the front end API, and you can use it with any of the front end technologies that you'd like. All right, so now on to dependencies. And the too long didn't read is that right now you're looking at either Redis or Postgres. It does ship with asynchronous or inline adapters. That's basically for your development environment if you just want to get up and running quickly. So asynchronous, as I understand it, means it's going to run it like in threads, but basically, within the same server. And then inline means it's going to be blocking, right? So if you've got a request that takes a long time, you're going to have to wait for it to finish. Again, these are only going to work in development, or basically where you only have one process running. So even in development, you can have like Puma or Unicorn or Passenger spin up multiple processes, and then they're not sharing all of the state, right? So you're not going to get quite the behavior that you want. So when you have a whole bunch of servers and they all need to talk to each other about what all's going on and who's receiving messages and who's sending messages, that's where the pub subpattern comes in. And right now, ActionCable has 2 drivers for that. They're pushing Redis out of the box. That's what they're using at Basecamp. Makes sense. But they also have a Postgres adapter using Postgres notify listen API. It's just implementing the pub subpattern. And so if you don't have Redis and don't want to add that dependency, but you still want to play around with ActionCable, you can run with Postgres to start. So the Postgres pattern, or the Postgres driver, is actually kind of cool. I don't know about at a massive scale, but it's got this neat trick where since it's all in Postgres, right? You can, if you want to, push some of your business logic into Postgres itself and add a Postgres trigger that basically waits for a new record to be created, right? And then instantly sends the notify, that's the publish command in Postgres. So you could have a whole bunch of different services writing to your database, like a new message to your messages table, and then Postgres is automatically taking care of notifying your ActionCable server, hey, we just got this new message, like, you should probably let all the people know. Does that make sense? I can dive into PubSub a little more if we like. All right, so what's the development environment look like? Well, of course, it's Rails, so we get auto reloading. You reload the page and your new code is in place. Oh wait, no we don't. So you have to stop your server and spin it, start it again in development every time that you make a change to anything in your app channels directory. And there's some really complicated threading, concurrency, something mumbo jumbo I didn't really understand, but the documentation was correct. You do have to stop your server and start it again. You can also easily use ActionCable with Webrick. No, you can't. And then, they've also got this pretty cool feature. So one of the things that's pretty common, or one of the patterns I ran into when developing with it is, like, I want to push out a message periodically, right? Like every second I want to update my inbox count, or every 60 seconds I want to send out a message, you know, updating some stats or something like that. So they have this periodically, you just put it in your channel and call that, and it takes care of doing that every so seconds. Oh, but it doesn't work, which is probably why they don't have any documentation around it. So that's what I get for reading the source code. All right, deployment. It does work on Heroku. So if you are using Unicorn or Puma or Passenger, I don't know, I just typed Passenger into Google Images and that came up, so. You are pretty much square as far as deployment goes. You've got two different options. So by default, and we'll go through like a guided tour or walkthrough here in just a bit so you can visualize some of the code. But conceptually, you have to decide on deployment whether you want to mount your ActionCable server inside your regular Rails app, inside your monolith, or if you want to just spin it up as a separate process. And ActionCable supports both pretty easily. And a lot of that's going to just depend on what scale you're working at, right? So if you've got a hobby app, probably easiest to just mount it inside your Rails app. Once you start dealing with a lot of concurrent connections, you want to be able to spin up your ActionCable server independently of your web server, right? Based on what kind of traffic you're getting. Also, I don't have a link in the slide, but I do have a GitHub repo at the end of the talk that has links to how to get ActionCable deployed on Heroku, and also one from the Passenger guys about getting it set up with them as well. All right, performance. So we have a few different considerations around performance. And one of the first ones that I ran into, mostly on a theoretical level, but it was interesting, was latency. So if you want to develop like say a chat server, or an instant message client, or maybe a real-time game, right? This WebSocket stuff, it's like, oh, it's real-time, you know, super fast, this is awesome. But you do have to consider where your servers are in relation to where your customers are. So if you only have one data center that's in Dallas, and you've got two guys in Australia who are trying to instant message each other or play an online game, basically the way ActionCable's set up, right, the message is going to go all the way to Dallas, and then ActionCable's going to send it all the way back to Australia. So it's just something to consider if that's like a use case. There are some and you don't really want to solve that problem. There's a lot of tools on the market that do solve that problem for a few dollars a month. Or you know, you can look at some other approaches, or spin up some servers closer to where your customer base is. So this next slide has a quote that kind of shocked me. I will let you guys read it. So this guy ran a bunch of tests on a few different node offerings on the market, as well as running a pretty much untuned out-of-the-box ActionCable with Puma. And for what it's worth, his results were basically like, looks about the same to me, which I found super fun and super encouraging. So this is I believe the default Puma configuration. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. With 16 threads and 4 workers. And so, yes?
With Rails 5, it'll be 5 by default.
So they're bumping up to 5 workers?
Well, 0 workers, so it's still JRuby compatible.
Right.
But only 5 threads, so that it also matches. Active Record has 5.
Is that because it's Rails 5?
It is now. Sorry.
So just for you guys in the back, in Rails 5 they are changing the defaults to 5 threads. Yes?
Yeah, out of the box.
Out of the box, but you can easily change it.
Yeah, please.
All right, so it depends on, it's simultaneous WebSocket connections means how many connections your users have to the site at the same time, right? So with 3, it took about 9 milliseconds, and it's scaling pretty much linearly here. With 300, it was taking up to 900 milliseconds. I wish I was working on something cool that had 300 simultaneous WebSocket connections, but I'm not. So, but that's good, because that means I can use ActionCable without really running any more tests. So I mentioned that ActionCable's got a few different components, and I liked that it's relatively easy to swap in and out specific components. We talked about ActionCable.js, ActionCable-JS if you want to use React or another front-end language. So the pub/sub engine is another component that you can, I guess not swap out, but you can scale horizontally. So if you've got Redis, you can just keep throwing, as I understand it, you can just keep throwing more Redis instances online for a while. All right. Questions about performance or anything we covered so far, or should I jump into a guided tour? Yes. So I had another app working with ActionCable, but I couldn't show that off, so I tried to recreate one badly, so bear with me. So here, the basic idea was have like a Big Brother application, right? So it's slurping in texts and tweets and I don't know, Facebook messages, and just displaying them in real time on a dashboard. So to get that set up, I set up what's called a channel. So you've got one connection, or each browser has one connection, but then within that connection they can have multiple channels, which is basically like a Slack chat room, right? So you have one login for your team, but then you can join or leave multiple channels, and they're each sending different streams of information down each channel. So that's what we're doing here. I've got a messages channel.
Yep. Do something on the screen.
Thank you. Mirror display. Cool.
You make your
Larger?
Yeah.
Is that better? You guys see it in the back? Probably do what is that? Unified view. All right, so this is the JavaScript side of things, the browser side of things. So here I just have a received function that's receiving this hash data, and it is appending the message to this collection data channel. It's just a little bit of jQuery. So that's all I have to do to receive a message from the server and have it show up in my UI. And I'll show a little bit more about how actually rendering out that message further on down. So this, I mentioned, yeah, we got channels. And then this was a watcher channel, so this is receiving a count of how many people are watching the screen at any given time. I'm going to jump straight to the message channel. So the slick thing about ActionCable is you've got this complexity, right? And it's just like the rest of Rails. It tries to minimize some of that complexity by allowing you to set up conventions. So with like a action controller, we have views that are named the same as our controllers, and Rails is sharp enough to just automatically load those views. And it's the same thing going on here. If we name message channel the same as on our front end, ActionCable is just wiring it all up together. So we're streaming it from messages, and we can also, so that's just the name of a channel, but we're also injecting this source, so we can have variables within our channel names, which makes sense because, right? Because Slack wants to stream specific channels specific to your team and specific to the channel name. It's the same concept here. Here's the periodically that doesn't work. And here we're just streaming from the watchers. So the watchers are a global state, right? We want to send the same, and anybody who's looking at it sees the same thing. All right, and then here is where the magic with the messages, the actual HTML is happening. So you'll see I am using the exact same partial that I would use to render this out on the front end. And I am basically just injecting that into the message, the JSON blob that is being sent over WebSockets to the server. So I only have to write that partial once, and then I get the same markup. I don't have to have a JavaScript, any kind of JavaScript front-end templates or anything else to handle it on the client side. This is one tricky thing that comes up. You might think you would have an after create hook here to actually relay the job to the front end. And the reason that it's recommended that you put it into an after commit hook is because, of course, Redis isn't going to respect your database transaction. So if anything goes wrong and it rolls back, your ActionCable just notified the front end about something that actually didn't succeed that rolled back. But even if you are using a Postgres pub sub, the same thing actually happens. So the notify and listen pub sub API in Postgres delivers the notifications to the listeners to the ActionCable server before the transaction commits. So even if the transaction rolls back, your messages still went through. So to avoid that, we just call it after the transaction has committed. And it wouldn't be a Rails feature if we didn't have another magic meta tag. So that's what this one's about. Basically just injects the address that your server's mounted on. And here in your config application.rb, you can configure where ActionCable is mounted. And in cable YAML, you can change out the adapter. And here is where you can prove your periodically code works, just not inside a periodically block. So why use ActionCable? I've got some code in the repo at the end that shows how it's very easy to handle authentication with ActionCable, and tying that into your existing authentication scheme, whether that's Devise or whatever else you'd like to use. The components are pretty easily swappable. There's already a lot of documentation around deployment, and it's horizontally scalable. And some of the gotchas that I ran into, the API has changed very, very rapidly over the past 6 to 9 months, I would say, which makes it very easy to start reading an article that seems like it was written recently, and they're just talking about like methods and terminology and things that just don't exist anymore. Along with that note, even if you're just go to like the GitHub Rails and start reading the README or the source code, even that has changed somewhat from the release candidate. So you probably have the release candidate mounted or bundled into your gem file, but that's no guarantee that that's what GitHub is telling you if you're looking at the master branch. No auto reloading, but along with that, Spring plus ActionCable is enough to drive you crazy. So you have to kill your server and be sure to kill Spring, and then wait for everything to boot up again.
There's a magic environment variable you can set that just will make Spring never work. It's great. It's like disable Spring or something like that.
Yes.
You just remove Spring from the gem file.
Yeah, you can do that too.
Well, but then you've got to get it through code review, and it turns into a 6-hour meeting. Or you can just set the environment variable. And then I did find one very curious bug report in the Rails GitHub issues where he was basically like, yeah, if I try to send 100 kilobytes of data over WebSockets, it's really slow. And the consensus seemed to be, don't do that. So in case you were considering doing that. So if you'd like to play with it further, Heroku has a very nifty like deploy your ActionCable demo to Heroku in 60 seconds button, and you can play around with it from there. And now for questions, discussions, and or heckling.
I found a chess game that says ActionCable. I was just playing the moment game. That's actually really cool. So it's a Rails 5 ActionCable chess game. I was not a question. I was just making a statement.
That's really cool. Does it actually implement like chess AI, or is it like to play with?
It's just 2 players, and it needs some features because it looks like if one person leaves, it just says, oh, they forfeited, you won. So there's no look like to see if you've actually mated somebody or whatnot. But it looks really cool. It works right out of the box, and there's no database. So
Nice.
1 git clone, 1 bundle, and it's up and running.
That's really cool. That actually touches on an interesting point to keep in mind when you're designing your application. If you need persistence, like you're a Slack channel and you need to like have people come back and read what happened in the past, you still have to persist everything to the database, to your database layer, so that you can load it again. Because otherwise, like as you saw, you just reload the page or you disconnect or something like that.
Right. Something with like a local storage would probably be clever to fix that. You know, what state you're in. Keep that in mind. You know, keeping state in mind. But yeah, work in progress.
Absolutely. Yes.
Is there any fancy way to monitor the database for changes and then have those pushed out by WebSocket, or is that just something you have to do on like after you save a new record in the database and have a hook to send it out?
Yeah, you could do that.
Yeah. With you could have a trigger and then use the notify in Postgres. So you basically set up a Postgres trigger that listens for whatever data changing or event that you're like create insert message or something like that. And then the trigger would send the notify statement, and then ActionCable is listening for the notify statements. So it would pick it up just the same as if Rails had sent the notify statement through Postgres.
If you want to use listen notify directly, I have a gem called HeyU.
Cool.
What? That wasn't a question.
No, I've I've used that gem and I somehow missed that you wrote it, but it's awesome, so thank you.
I got some more things just to bring out since we're talking about WebSockets. I like your analogy regarding to the use of a telephone, but believe it or not, it was in this same room many years ago when WebSockets were first being introduced that I forgot the guy's name, developer from Cap Forward did a speech talking about Pusher, which is a company that would provide WebSocket service to us back then when we couldn't put them into the system ourselves. So this is good that we can actually take over that. But the main point he made that I thought was really nice was, similar to his question, is if an event occurs on the server, you can now notify the client, and that's kind of what that's all about. So now, I used to write a lot of dashboards, and the way you would do that back in the days, you would have this Ajax poll that would just constantly be blowing up your server logs, and I'd have so many administrators go, Rob, will you stop, running all your garbage, on my server because I can't see anything, And so now with this, you can actually just have it to where you trigger an event that occurs on the server, say someone from China is knocking on your SSH server at home, and you want to know what they're doing, or if someone's compromised something, you can send that push notification to your client using WebSocket. It's made it much cleaner without all that noise in your logs.
Absolutely. Or another pattern I run into a lot is you want to download a CSV when it's finished generating from Sidekick, and so you probably have some kind of like job ID, and then it's polling, is the job done? WebSockets makes a lot of sense for just like pushing the notification out from Sidekick directly to the front end, like, hey, your job is done, here's your URL to download your finished CSV.
Right, yeah. Before, actually, believe it or not, just one iteration before Rails 5, we had Rails 4, and there was the consequence was Action Live. That wasn't nowhere near as good as the WebSocket, but you can still get that same kind of server-side event notification. Say I had a client that needed a file uploader tool, and for every file to be scanned with a virus scanner, and you don't know how long that's going to take. If the file's 300 megabytes,
Right.
or what, but then obviously whenever that job finishes, you want to notify or update the attributes of that file to allow it to now be usable through the system.
Absolutely. And before I forget, if you do want to use ActionCable with Rails 4, I am told you can just drop it into your gem file and it works. I haven't tried it, but I'm told it works. We're good? Cool. Thank you.
Yay, that was amazing. So last but not least, I would like to call our wonderful socialization practice sponsors, One More Cloud. Hello.
Hi everyone.
Hi, Nick.
Hi, I'm Nick. Hi Shneems. Hi Shneems' beard. I haven't seen you in a long time. It's an awesome beard. First of all, I want to say thanks everyone for coming out tonight. I don't know if you guys do these things a lot. I don't do these nearly as often as I should these days, but I really got my career started in Ruby and in Rails as a junior developer, going to meetups like this and going to the drink ups afterwards. The socialization practice afterwards. So thanks for coming out and parking downtown and networking with your peers and sharing knowledge. Especially if you're kind of experienced and jaded in whatever, like you can be a major influence on someone else in their career, so that's awesome. Anyway, just a little bit about me, about us. I am hiring, of course. We at One More Cloud do hosted data services, which sounds really boring. It is kind of boring, and that's a good thing when you're doing high-scale hosted databases and operations, because exciting means nobody's getting any sleep. So we host search engines specifically for Apache Solr and Elasticsearch. And so raise your hand if you've ever worked with Solr. I'm sorry, I'm glad you made it through that experience. No, it's great. It's and then raise your hand if you ever worked with Elasticsearch. And maybe raise your hand if you want to work with either Solr or Elasticsearch, or kind of curious to learn. Yeah, I mean, it's they're fun tools. They're pretty specialized. If you're not familiar with either one, they are a search engine is a very specialized database that you give it your data, you give it your documents, and then you send it queries, and it's really good and really fast at finding exactly what you're looking for. And there's awesome open source software for that. It turns out it's kind of a pain to host and manage that stuff at scale. So that's what I do, kind of by accident. And if you want to learn more about that story, feel free to come hang out afterwards, and happy to answer your questions about search. And if you are interested, we are very much looking for we're looking for some engineers to help with kind of marketing and growth. And so if you think analytics and tracking analytics and like being able to see someone go through the whole process of being a visitor to a site all the way through like the various pages and buttons they clicked on and how they ended up to be a customer, and kind of doing that at a large scale, I'd love to kind of chat with you more, because we're just starting to dabble with that sort of things, and we're just kind of a team of engineers that are learning as we go. Secondly, also, if you like learning things, if you just love to kind of learn new technologies, if you like to dabble in other platforms besides Rails, if you like to teach, people what you've learned, share that kind of knowledge, we do a lot of, I call it free consulting for our customers via support, who are all developers themselves. And so, if you want to learn Elasticsearch, I've got a fire hose for you to drink from. And my name's Nick, and I'll see you guys downstairs.
Awesome, thank you so much. So before we leave for BD Riley's, I do want to say that we do have a Slack community. So if any of you want to continue to talk more about ActionCable, you want to continue to talk about how to hire and keep junior developers, definitely check out our Slack. Right now it's invite only, and any of the wonderful Austin on Rails organizers can add you. So I can add you, Shmeems, Britt, Damon, we can all add you. Just let us know. If you ping me on Twitter, I'm at Ceci Korea. PM me your email, I'll add you, or PM at Austin on Rails, your email will add you. So this is a great way where we can continue to chat about Rails. There were some really good conversations there this week, so don't miss out on our awesome Slack. And so, yeah, thanks everybody for coming out. And yeah, let's go have some beer over at BD Riley's.
Cool.
The sidebar does not scroll, so I actually did not know. Maybe I need to leave. All of these are multiple. Yeah. I mean, at home it's fine. I got my kids. I open it outside. It's not fair that work.
That's my son.